It was the kind of love story that people think only exists in movies, until reality quietly walks in and changes everything with a single sentence. I still remember the moment when everything I thought I knew about happiness shattered without warning. 1 second, I was living in what felt like a dream, and the next, I was standing at the edge of a truth I never saw coming. A truth that didn't just change my relationship, it changed me. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and love that survives even the hardest truths, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to The Kindness Chronicles. Because stories like this remind us that sometimes love is not about perfection, but about courage. And what happened next tested every part of mine. It started in the most ordinary way imaginable. I met her on a rainy evening in a city that never really slows down. The streets were wet, reflecting neon lights like scattered fragments of another world. I had stopped for coffee, just trying to escape the chaos of a long day, when I noticed her sitting near the window, staring outside as if she was waiting for something she wasn't sure would ever come. There was something different about her. Not in a loud or attention-seeking way, but in the quietness she carried, like someone who had learned to live carefully with her own thoughts. When our eyes briefly met, it felt like a sentence I hadn't finished reading. Days turned into conversations. Conversations turned into comfort. And comfort slowly became something deeper, something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. She laughed in a way that made ordinary moments feel softer. She listened in a way that made silence feel safe. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't just existing, I was living again. Everything felt perfect in that fragile, beautiful way that people never trust fully because they are afraid it might disappear. But I didn't listen to that fear. I should have. As the weeks passed, our connection grew into something undeniable. We spent evenings walking through quiet streets, talking about dreams we had abandoned and hopes we were afraid to name. There was warmth in every moment, a kind of emotional safety I didn't know I had been starving for. But there were also gaps, small ones at first. Moments where she would pause mid-sentence when talking about her past. Times when her phone would ring and she would step away with a seriousness that didn't match her usual calm. A subtle distance she carried, like a locked room inside her heart. I noticed it, but I didn't push. Because when something feels this good, you learn to be grateful instead of curious. Still, life has a way of revealing what silence tries to protect. It happened on a night that looked no different from any other. We were sitting together after dinner, the kind of quiet evening that usually feels like home. The world outside was calm, and for once, I thought I had found something steady in my life. But I didn't know that she had already decided that tonight would change everything. Her voice was different when she finally spoke, not louder, not dramatic, just heavier. Like every word had been carried for years before finding its way out. She told me she had something important to say. And then came the sentence that stopped my entire world. She had a 6-year-old son. For a moment, there was no sound in the room. Not even silence, something deeper than silence. My mind struggled to process it, like a system refusing an update it wasn't prepared for. Everything I thought I knew about her suddenly rearranged itself into something unfamiliar. She wasn't just a woman I loved. She was a mother. And she had kept this part of her life hidden from me since the beginning. What followed wasn't anger at first. It was confusion. A storm of questions that didn't have immediate answers. Why didn't she tell me sooner? Was I just a temporary part of her life? Did she think I would walk away if I knew? But beneath all of it was something quieter, something more uncomfortable. Fear. Not fear of her son. Not fear of responsibility. But fear of what this truth meant for the future I had already started building in my mind. She didn't defend herself immediately. She didn't try to justify or escape. Instead, she simply looked at me with eyes that carried exhaustion far older than her years. And in that silence, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Pain. Not the kind that comes from a single moment, but the kind that is collected over years of survival. In the days that followed, everything between us changed. Not abruptly, but slowly, like a light dimming instead of switching off. I found myself replaying her words again and again, trying to understand where I stood in a story that suddenly had another central character I had never met. Her son. A child I had never seen but now couldn't stop thinking about. Questions filled my mind in ways I couldn't control. What kind of life did she live before me? Why was she alone? And most importantly, why did she believe she had to hide this part of herself? But even more than curiosity, there was something else growing inside me. Distance. Because love, when tested by unexpected truths, doesn't always break immediately. Sometimes it hesitates. Sometimes it steps back just enough to see if it can still breathe. And that hesitation hurt more than I expected. She didn't push me away. Instead, she gave me space. But I could feel her watching me from a distance, waiting for a reaction that would decide everything. And I didn't know what to do with that kind of responsibility. I wanted to be the kind of person who understood. Who accepted. Who saw beyond circumstances and chose love anyway. But I was also human. And humans don't always respond to truth with clarity. Sometimes they respond with fear disguised as silence. Days passed like that, quiet, uncertain, emotionally suspended. Until one evening changed everything again. I saw her son for the first time by accident. It was outside a small park, where she had taken him after school. I had gone there without planning it, still unsure of what I was feeling, still trying to make sense of everything. And then I saw them, a small boy running toward her with a kind of pure joy that only children have. She bent down instantly, holding him close with a love that felt instinctive, natural, unfiltered. And in that moment, something inside me cracked, not from rejection, but from realization. This wasn't a secret she was hiding to deceive me. This was a life she had been protecting. A life she built alone. A life where she was both mother and father, protector and provider, strength and softness all at once. And suddenly, my confusion started shifting into something else. Understanding. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the boy. About her. About the life she must have lived before I ever entered it. The sacrifices. The loneliness. The strength it must have taken to survive without breaking. And I realized something uncomfortable. I hadn't been asked to carry her past. I had been invited into her present. But I was the one struggling to accept it. The next time we met, I saw her differently. Not as someone who had hidden something from me, but as someone who had been carrying something heavy alone for too long. She didn't ask me for acceptance. She didn't ask me for forgiveness. She simply asked if I could understand. And for the first time since she told me the truth, I stopped thinking about what I had lost, and started thinking about what I could still choose. Because love is not tested when everything is easy. It is tested when truth enters the room. What followed wasn't instant resolution. It was slow rebuilding. Learning to exist in a reality that was bigger than my expectations. Meeting her son for the first time properly wasn't a dramatic moment, it was quiet, almost shy. The kind of meeting where a child observes before trusting, and an adult learns before judging. And in that simple exchange, something shifted. Not everything healed. But something softened. There were still difficult days. Moments where I questioned whether I was capable of being part of this life. Moments where fear tried to return in different forms. But there were also moments of unexpected joy, small, genuine, unplanned. A child laughing without reason. A shared meal that felt like belonging. A quiet evening where presence mattered more than perfection. And slowly, I began to understand that family is not always something you enter fully formed. Sometimes, it is something you grow into. The real turning point didn't come from grand gestures. It came from choice. The choice to stay even when things were complicated. The choice to understand instead of escape. The choice to see her not as someone with a past I had to accept, but as someone with a life I had the privilege to understand. And in that choice, love stopped being fragile. It became real. Today, when I think back to that moment, the moment she told me she had a 6-year-old son, I no longer see it as the moment everything changed. I see it as the moment truth entered the story. And truth, no matter how difficult, has a way of revealing what love is actually made of. Not perfection. Not conditions. But courage. If this story touched your heart in any way, take a moment to engage with this video. Your support means more than you know, and it helps bring more stories like this to life, stories about love, truth, and second chances. And before you go, here is a special request. If you were in my place, would you have stayed or walked away? Write your answer in the comments below. I read every single one. Because sometimes, the most important part of a story, is what it makes us realize about ourselves. And maybe, just maybe, love isn't about finding someone perfect. Maybe it's about choosing someone real.